My fiancée slept with her ex during our engagement trip, so I let her enjoy the vacation, then left her stranded without saying a word. I'm a 28-year-old guy who, for the first time in my life, honestly believed I was about to get everything I'd ever wanted. Lila wasn't just my girlfriend, she was my world. The kind of woman you imagine building a future with, someone who could make an ordinary Thursday feel like a movie scene just by smiling at you from across a crowded room. We'd been together for 3 years, and even with all our ups and downs, I never doubted I was the luckiest man alive. So when I started planning our engagement trip, I went all in, Bali. Her dream destination, she'd mentioned it a dozen times, always with that wistful look, like she could already feel the warm sand between her toes. I spent months piecing together the details. Secret calls to luxury resorts, checking sunset times, practicing the proposal speech in front of the bathroom mirror like an idiot. I even learned how to pronounce I love you in Indonesian because I wanted every single second to be perfect. She had no idea. I still remember the way her face lit up at the airport, how she squeezed my hand so tight I thought she'd cut off my circulation. "This can't be real," she kept whispering, eyes wide with disbelief as we pulled up to our private villa. White sheets, infinity pool, frangipani petals scattered everywhere. It was exactly what she'd always talked about, and seeing her that happy made all the stress and secret planning worth it. I couldn't help it, lying in that huge bed beside her the first night. I actually caught myself thinking, I did it. I really did it. This is the start of everything. It was one of those rare moments in life where you think the universe is finally on your side. But looking back, I realize now, those moments are always the ones that hurt the most, right before everything falls apart. The second day in Bali, something started to feel off. I noticed it first at breakfast. Lila barely touched her food, picking at fresh mango and toast while her eyes darted to her phone every few seconds. She kept it face down, like she was guarding it from the world. And every time it buzzed, she'd excuse herself. "Work's blowing up," she'd say, forcing a laugh that never quite reached her eyes. I tried to brush it off. "It's your vacation, babe," I told her, trying to sound casual, even playful. "Work can wait," but she just nodded absently and looked away. Later, as we walked through the bustling Ubud markets hand in hand, she kept pulling away to answer calls. The sound of her voice would drop to a whisper just out of earshot. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. She's always been a little high-strung about work, I thought. Always hustling, always juggling deadlines. But that night, while we watched the sun melt into the ocean, I caught her texting again, fingers flying across the screen. "Everything okay?" I asked quietly, hoping she'd meet my eyes. She smiled, but it was that tight, polite smile she gives strangers at parties. "Just some drama with the marketing team. Sorry, I don't want it to mess with our trip." I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was just being paranoid. After all, she'd said yes to Bali. She'd said yes to us. But lying awake that night, I couldn't shake the feeling, like a storm was building somewhere just out of sight. I kept replaying every weird moment, every stifled laugh, every glance at her phone. My mind spun with questions I was too scared to ask, and that was just the beginning. It was our third day in Bali when she dropped it, so casually, like she was talking about the weather. We were lounging by the pool, the kind of morning where the world feels quiet and safe, when Lila suddenly said, "You know what's crazy? Mark is here, my ex, with his friends." She scrolled through her phone, showed me a blurry Instagram story of a crowded beach bar, and shrugged like it meant nothing. I laughed it off at first. "Small world," I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. But something in her eyes shifted, like she was watching for my reaction, measuring it. She added, "He DM'd me. Just said hi. Totally random." Her voice was too quick, too rehearsed. My stomach twisted. From that moment, I noticed a change. Suddenly, every time we left the villa, she suggested places she'd heard were cool, places I realized later were spots Mark's group had tagged on social media. One night, she insisted on going to a packed beach bar on the other side of the island. "It's supposed to have great live music," she said, practically dragging me into the crowd. I recognized Mark instantly, tall, tanned, the kind of guy who always looks like he knows a secret. Their hug was just a little too long, their smiles a little too bright. I tried to play it cool, Sat through awkward introductions, sipped watery cocktails, pretended not to notice the inside jokes flying over my head. The whole night I felt like a ghost, like I'd been invited to someone else's reunion. Lila kept glancing at her phone, laughing at texts she wouldn't show me. When we finally left, she was quiet.
"You're not jealous, are you?"
She asked, smirking as she climbed into the cab. Don't be weird. He's just a friend now. I wanted to believe her. I told myself trust was everything, that jealousy would only ruin what we had. But in that dark taxi, watching the neon lights flicker over her face, I felt something cold settle inside me. I'd been carrying the ring everywhere, waiting for the perfect moment. Bali sunsets were always her dream, so I'd planned it all. The candles, the blanket, the little Bluetooth speaker with our song queued up. That evening, as the sky bled orange and pink, I led her to the quiet end of the beach. She laughed, kicking sand at my feet, hair tangled from the salt air. For a second, the tension melted, and it felt like we were just us again. I dropped to one knee, heart in my throat. Her eyes widened. Wait, what? She covered her mouth as I launched into the speech I'd practiced 100 times. I told her I loved her more than I'd ever thought possible, that I wanted every sunrise and sunset with her, forever. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the box. She said yes. She cried, hugged me so tight I almost forgot everything. I slipped the ring on her finger, and people on the boardwalk actually cheered. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, and for a heartbeat, it almost was. But that night, back in the villa, the dream started to crack. Lila barely touched her dinner, the new ring glinting as she typed out messages on her phone. I asked, "Everything okay?" And she snapped, "Why are you so paranoid?" She went out onto the balcony to get some air and stayed there for nearly an hour, phone pressed to her ear. I sat alone with the empty plates, the uneaten cake, my new title, Fiancée, feeling suddenly heavy. When she finally came to bed, she turned away from me. I wrapped an arm around her waist and she flinched. "I'm just tired," she mumbled. I stared at the ceiling in the darkness, hope and dread fighting inside me. Even then, I tried to convince myself it was just nerves, that she was overwhelmed by everything. I didn't want to see what was really happening, but in the pit of my stomach, something told me tonight was only the beginning. The next morning, Lila was up before me, hair still damp from a shower I hadn't heard. She said she wanted to explore the shops alone. Just for an hour, so I nodded, pretending not to notice how quickly she threw on her sundress and grabbed her phone. I waited in the villa, scrolling through meaningless news, sipping cold coffee, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. But after an hour, then two, she still hadn't come back. I called her, no answer. My messages got read but not replied to. I decided to walk to the market, half expecting to spot her at a stall or a cafe. She wasn't anywhere. As I wandered back, a taxi pulled up outside our villa. I ducked behind a hedge, heart pounding. Why was I hiding? Lila stepped out, laughing at something on her phone. A second later, a man's voice echoed down the drive. Mark. He got out, buttoning his shirt, sunglasses perched on his head. They hugged, again, too long, too familiar, and she whispered something that made him laugh. He left first, strolling off with a casual wave, and Lila checked her reflection in a window before coming inside. I waited until she'd showered, again, and then came out, acting surprised to see her. "Hey, I was starting to worry," I said, voice trembling just a little. She breezed past me. "Just shopping. You know how it is." She tossed her bag onto the bed, never meeting my eyes. Later, when she went to the pool, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I saw the name, just M. The curiosity got the better of me. The texts were deleted, but the notifications didn't lie. "See you soon. Same place?" "Miss you already." That night, I barely ate. Every sound from the street outside made me flinch. I told myself it was a coincidence, that I was reading too much into things. But the doubt was turning to something darker, something I couldn't shake. By the time I lay down next to her, I knew. I wasn't imagining any of it. And the worst was yet to come. Sleep barely came that night. I lay there, staring at the moonlight leaking through the curtains, my mind looping over every strange glance, every secretive smile. Lila's breathing was soft beside me, her back turned, the diamond ring glinting faintly in the dark. At some point, her phone vibrated on the nightstand. I tried to ignore it, but something in me snapped. Curiosity, desperation, the need to finally know. I reached for her phone, hands shaking. The passcode was the same as always. My heart hammered so hard I was sure it would wake her. Messages flooded the screen, some from friends, but the most recent, a string of texts from M. I scrolled through, breath caught in my chest. What I found shattered me. There they were, explicit messages, photos, even a video. Plans to meet again. Jokes about keeping me distracted. I felt the room tilt beneath me. My vision blurred with tears and rage, my ears ringing as I read each word, each secret they'd shared while I thought I was building our future. I wanted to scream, to wake her up and demand answers, to throw her things into the street and burn every memory we'd made, but I didn't. Instead, I sat in the bathroom, clutching her phone, the tiles cold beneath my feet. I cried like I hadn't since I was a kid, messy, ugly, choking sobs that felt like they'd never end. Eventually, I wiped my face, stared at my reflection in the mirror, and made a decision. I would let her have her dream vacation. I would let her play the part, wear the ring, bask in her secret victory. And then, when she least expected it, I'd take everything back. I crawled back into bed, not touching her, not even breathing too loud. I lay awake until dawn, numb, empty, a stranger in my own life. But inside, a cold, focused anger was blooming. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. The next 2 days were the hardest act of my life. I woke up, made coffee, and smiled like nothing had changed. I planned more beach trips, more picture-perfect excursions, sunset boat rides, market strolls, couples massages. Lila seemed happier than ever, posting photos of us on Instagram with captions like "lucky girl" and "living the dream." She leaned into me for the camera, kissed my cheek, laughed at my dumb jokes, all while her phone never left her side. Inside, I was falling apart. Every time she texted, I imagined Mark's name flashing on her screen. Every secret glance, every excuse to step away for a work call felt like another knife twisting in my gut. At night, I'd lie beside her, listening to her shallow breathing, wondering how many lies could fit between two people sharing a bed. But I kept my mask on. I played the devoted fiancé, never letting her see a crack. If she noticed my silence, she didn't say anything. Maybe she just thought I was tired from the sun. Maybe she just didn't care. One afternoon, we lounged by the pool, the air thick with humidity and the scent of frangipani. She scrolled through her phone, grinning at something, and I asked, "Who's making you smile like that?" She barely looked up. "Just the girls," she lied, fingers dancing across the glass. I almost wanted her to confess just so I could stop pretending. But she never did. Instead, she grew more relaxed, more affectionate in public, more eager to plan the next trip together. She had no idea what was coming. By the end of the second day, I'd decided I would let her get as comfortable as possible, because the higher she climbed, the farther she'd have to fall. The night before our flight home, I couldn't take the guessing anymore. Lila said she wanted to go for a walk to clear her head, claiming she needed a moment alone to process all the emotions from the trip. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, but I knew better by then. My hands shook as I watched her slip out into the humid dark, phone clutched tight, hair still damp from the shower. A few minutes later, I followed. I stayed in the shadows, walking far enough behind to keep her in sight as she turned down side streets toward the neon pulse of a beach bar. I watched through the crowds, heart pounding, as she found Mark waiting at the edge of the terrace, his arm draped casually across the back of a chair. They greeted each other like they were alone in the world, her laugh too loud, his hand lingering at her waist. I hid behind a pillar, my breath shallow, my fists clenched. They ordered drinks, leaned close, faces inches apart, and I saw her take off the ring and slip it into her purse. That image burned itself into my brain, my fiancé, bare-fingered, giggling, as if she'd never belonged to me at all. They left together, disappearing down a moonlit alley. I waited, rooted in place, pulse roaring in my ears. I'd never felt so powerless, so completely erased. I wasn't angry anymore, just hollow. When I finally stumbled back to the villa, I was numb, barely able to move. She came home 2 hours later, her breath sweet with rum, tossing her bag onto the floor like nothing had happened. She curled up next to me, whispering, "I love you." I stared at the ceiling, not answering, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. That was my lowest point, my rock bottom. And it was also the moment I decided I was done being anyone's fool. By morning, I was strangely calm. There was no more second-guessing, no frantic hope that she'd explain it all away. I just felt a cold, steady focus, like my mind had clicked into place. Lila slept in, sprawled across the sheets, still wearing last night's makeup. I sat at the edge of the bed, watching the sunlight move across the floor, quietly packing my suitcase so I wouldn't make a sound. I took care of every detail. My flight home was at noon, hours before hers. I paid the hotel bill, made sure my credit cards and accounts were all locked down, and canceled our shared bookings. Everything from the airport shuttle to the excursions she wanted to do one last time. I left no forwarding address, no trail, no hint of what was coming. Before I left, I stood over her for a moment, listening to her soft, steady breathing. For a split second, I almost caved, almost reached out, almost woke her up to demand the truth, to have a screaming match that would make it all real. But I didn't owe her any more pain or the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I wanted my silence to be the last thing she remembered. I wrote a note on hotel stationery. Simple and sharp. Enjoy the rest of your trip. I placed it on the pillow, right next to her ring, which I'd quietly slipped off her hand while she slept. With that, I closed the door, feeling both heavier and lighter than I ever had in my life. I didn't look back. The cab was waiting, engine idling. As we pulled away, Bali's sunrise seemed brighter, sharper, like the world was finally coming into focus. I was gone before she ever knew I'd left. And for the first time in days, I finally felt free. The airport felt surreal, like I was drifting through someone else's life. I turned off my phone as soon as I cleared security, not wanting to see a single message from her. My flight was half empty, the kind of sleepy midday ride where everyone's lost in their own world. I stared out at the clouds, numb and exhausted, replaying every moment of the past week in my mind. It wasn't until I landed back home and finally powered on my phone that the chaos began. Notification after notification flooded in, calls, texts, WhatsApp voice notes. The first few were just Lila. Hey, where are you? Did you go out to get breakfast? Then, I can't find you. Are you mad at me? By the time she realized I was gone for good, the tone turned frantic. Voice messages that blurred the line between rage and panic. You can't just leave me here. What the hell is wrong with you? Call me back! I didn't reply. I blocked her number, deleted her on every platform, Instagram, Facebook, even Venmo. I locked down my accounts, changed every password, and made sure there was no way for her to reach me directly. She was truly stranded. She couldn't charge anything to my card, couldn't access our bookings, couldn't even order room service without running into a wall. It wasn't just her. Within hours, her friends and even her family started messaging me, angry, confused, demanding answers. How could you do this to her? She's all alone! I left them all on read, letting the silence speak for itself. I knew what would happen next. She'd have to explain. She'd have to face the fallout, the embarrassment, the truth. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to pick up the pieces, and as I lay in my own bed that night, far away from Bali, I finally exhaled. But I knew the real storm was only just beginning. The aftermath was uglier than I imagined. Word got out fast, first in whispers among our friends, then as a storm of group chats, then as a string of half-truths and wild accusations posted online. Lila's family was the first to come after me, blowing up my phone with furious messages. Her mother's voicemail was a masterclass in guilt. How dare you abandon my daughter in a foreign country? What kind of man are you? Her sister sent a chain of texts so long it crashed my phone for a minute, but I'd come prepared. When Lila's friends started spamming me, some with threats, some pretending to want my side of the story, I sent a single folder of screenshots. The texts, the photos, the receipts, every proof of her betrayal, cold and undeniable. I didn't add a single word. I didn't have to. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. That's when the sides started to form. Some people, the ones who had always believed Lila's version of things, unfollowed me overnight. Others, people who'd watched me bend over backwards for her, sent quiet messages of support. Saw the proof. You did what you had to. I ignored most of it. I wasn't interested in a public war. I just wanted it to be over. As for Lila, her return was anything but triumphant. She eventually managed to get home thanks to her parents wiring her money and booking a new flight. By the time she landed, the story had twisted so many times, even she didn't know which version to tell. She texted apologies, wrote long emails begging for another chance, then swung to venom, blaming me for everything. I didn't answer. The truth hung between us like a thick fog, and for the first time she had to face it alone. I was done being her backup plan, and slowly, piece by piece, I started to reclaim my own life. Months have passed since Bali, and the pain doesn't burn like it used to. I wish I could say I moved on instantly, but the truth is, heartbreak drags its feet. At first, I kept replaying everything. Her laugh, her lies, the way she slipped the ring off without hesitation. I had nightmares of that island, waking up in a cold sweat, reaching for someone who wasn't there. But the silence, the space I gave myself, became its own kind of healing. I started running again, cooking my own meals, fixing things in my apartment that I'd let fall apart. For the first time in years, my thoughts were my own. I didn't have to worry about someone hiding in the next room with secrets I was too scared to face. I opened up to friends, told them the whole story, and felt the weight of shame finally start to lift. Eventually, I decided to write my side on Reddit, not for pity, but for release. I poured every ugly detail into words like I'm doing now. I got messages from strangers who'd lived the same nightmare. Some told me I was brave. Others just thanked me for saying what they never could. That meant more than I expected. Lila tried to reach out a few more times, cycling through apologies and blame. I never replied. I learned that closure doesn't come from the person who hurt you. It comes from refusing to let them hurt you anymore. Now, when I think back to Bali, I don't picture her at all. I picture the sun coming up over the water and the feeling of stepping onto that plane finally free. The best revenge wasn't leaving her stranded. It was choosing myself and building a life she'll never be a part of again. And that's the ending I never saw coming.